This is a little bit different because this is more conceptual than documentary. I was trying to illustrate something that I couldn't witness. In this particular case, you have the drone war, and by that I mean since around 2004, the United States government's main objective has been what it calls the war on terror, so trying to hunt down terrorism suspects outside of the United States. And the preferred weapon for doing that is the drone. And if you look at the history of photography and conflict photography, sort of most US conflicts since the camera was invented have been covered by photographers, whether this is the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War. And those photographs have played a large role in sort of the policy and conscience of the United States and the visual memory of war. This was all carried by documentary photographers or combat photographers. And then all of a sudden we arrive at the drone war and we don't have public footage of the drone strikes. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, the drone strikes happen in very remote areas that are often off limits to journalists, and the strikes are sort of one-off, unexpected things rather than a battle that you could predict. And then the other thing is that actually the military by default is filming every single strike because the drone is a flying camera with missiles, but they don't release that footage to the public unless it fits their strategic or propaganda aims, right? So we've got this major US conflict and foreign policy going on, and you don't have a visual record of it. And so I was trying to figure out how can I, as a photographer, fulfill the role that previous photographers have fulfilled in other US conflicts. And I thought through various ways of how we could do this, maybe taking portraits of people who had been injured by drone strikes or had families, members that were victims. I thought through different ways, and then, roughly at the same time, consumer drones were starting to be available, and so it was possible for me to modify a drone and put my camera on it and take pictures. And I thought maybe the way I could tell this story is through the perspective, the way the drone sees the world tells something about the United States' relationship with these people through the drone. Shifting that perspective really changes how we perceive something. So there's one incident where I was photographing people doing yoga in a park, and if you see that at ground level and you see the green grass and the people, you can overhear them saying nice things, and if all of a sudden you're broken off from the audio and you're seeing the world through black and white or infrared footage from a great distance, and you're looking for a certain kind of behavior, then even doing yoga can look suspect to you, right? In the case of this one photograph, I show it to different people, and about half the time they look at it, they say, oh, I think they're doing yoga, and the other half they're saying, oh, they're doing Muslim-style prayer. And if you saw them on the ground and it was in color and you didn't have this bird's eye view, drone perspective, you would never think that. So surveillance photography has its own texture, it has its own perspective, and then that changes the perception that people have of a scene. What I wanted to do with Blue Sky Days is sort of turn the mirror around and have everyday life in the United States and normal people seen from the point of view that we are watching people, the United States is watching people, that it suspects of certain activities in foreign countries. What is it like to have that gaze turned from the other point of view? How does it make things that might seem innocuous suddenly look suspect? When it was released, it was under the Obama administration, and the Obama administration is kind of, I would say, the ones that were behind the dawn of the drone age. Before that, it was like just starting to be used as a weapon, but not the major weapon, and it was used for a long time for surveillance. But under President Obama, the drone sort of became the key weapon for his administration. And strangely enough, there was a version of the project that was made into a video by the digital team at National Geographic, and without telling me, they submitted it for an award at the White House News Photographers Association or something like that. And so it actually won first place in this thing. And then the editor from National Geographic went to this dinner at the White House where Obama showed up. So I thought this was pretty amazing that you create a body of work that was openly critical of the top foreign policy priority of the government at the time, and that there was a way for this to sort of reach the halls of power and be exposed to policymakers. So in that particular period, I didn't receive any blowback. And then also, just by happenstance, the timing of my project overlapped with when Edward Snowden came out, and there was suddenly a big debate about surveillance, and that the way that data was being collected by modern technology, whether it be drones or internet service providers or networking platforms, all of a sudden sort of came to a head, and people realized that this data had a second life, was being used for targeting and tracking, and not just for what they thought. So that debate that Edward Snowden brought out and the ensuing privacy debate was not very visual. And Blue Sky Days is one of the few projects that is a very visual and visceral way to talk about this new age that we live in, where privacy is compromised for the purpose of targeting.